Welcome to the Wedding Whisperer podcast, where we honor every kind of love and the stories that bring weddings to life. In honor of Pride Month, today's episode is all about uplifting LGBTQ plus voices in the wedding industry. Whether you're a couple planning your wedding day or a vendor looking to create a more inclusive space, this conversation is for you. We'll be talking about what true inclusivity looks like in weddings, sharing stories from wedding pros, and offering tips on how to make sure everyone feels seen, respected, and celebrated this month and every month. There is video to go along with this podcast on YouTube if you prefer to watch instead of just listening. And my guests today are Kaelyn Caldwell and Glenn Means III. You're listening to The Wedding Whisperer with Sarah Burton of Simply Love Studio in Lexington, Kentucky.
Kaelyn. Hi, Glenn. Thank you so much for joining me today. Before we dive in, I do want to do some introduction. Kaelyn, we can start with you.
I own Kentucky Event Company and my wedding planner, and I do a lot of other things in and out of events and entertainment and entrepreneurship, and I'm excited to be here.
How long have you been in the wedding and event industry now?
21 years. I started in high school. I had an internship in high school and wanted to be an interior designer. Long story short, it did not go well. They moved me to Seasons Catering, and I loved it and started working for them part-time on the side after school, and went back to Seasons for 2 more rotations in that same internship program, and then started doing events on the side of that. So I kind of cut my teeth through Seasons, and then just, trial and error. I probably did 10 solo events a year. It was mostly my parents' friends and clients. My dad may have been begging people to let me do their event. But back then I did the food, I did the catering, I did the design, the decor, all the stuff. These weren't big events, but I had a lot of fun. A very long time. I told somebody the other day, 19 years, and so they said the year, and I was like, oh, no, it's been longer than that. 21.
So you've got a lot of experience then.
I've done a couple of weddings.
Yeah. As we are chatting today, I will say that I know Kaelyn a little bit better than Glenn. I think this is the first time we've ever actually spoken face to face. I'm getting to know Glenn today as well. If you'll share a little bit about your background.
My name is Glenn Means, and I'm the director of the LGBTQ plus Resource Center at the University of Kentucky. And I also have the pleasure of working with Kaelyn with her event planning company, Kentucky Event Company, and my wedding planner. We've got to partner on a lot of great events, and I am just had the privilege and honor of being able to work under her guidance and learn just a lot of great things within the wedding industry. And as far as experience, it's kind of crazy. I mean, most of my experience has been under a lot of planners, but mostly Kaelyn. Kaelyn can tell you, we kind of hit it off the bat in the beginning. It's kind of like that weird COVID stretch. Like we worked a little bit before then it kind of halted. Then fast forward to now, I feel like every weekend or at least once a month, we're doing an event together in some capacity.
Yeah. Let me correct you, Glenn. The pleasure is all mine. And you don't work under me, you work with me, because half the time you're keeping me in line.
We have some notes for today, but we're going to kind of probably be all over the place. I was chatting with another vendor before starting this and just talking about how we try very careful. Most of us in the wedding world try to be very careful in what we're saying, and we want to be respectful of everyone. But we also have a lot to learn. I told both of them that they may have to correct me some as we go through. I do want to start a little bit with your personal lives. Kaelyn, I know you got married, was it last year or 2 years ago?
23. So almost 2 years ago. 2 years ago in August.
You had 2 weddings, kind of.
Yeah. 1 ceremony, 2 receptions.
Okay.
Yeah. I've lived in Lexington the majority of my life. I'm from here, went to college here, and then stayed here for the most part after college. You have you build up a lot of friends. And then being in the event industry, there's a lot of folks that you want to work with, right? You can only have so many caterers. You can only have so many DJs outside of making it like a vendor expo, which we didn't want. It's really hard to pick. And then you're also friends with them. So it's like, I don't want you to work, but I want to support you. And my wife has a ton of friends as well. and work, folks and all of that. So it was really hard. And we started looking at the guest list and it's going to be like 400 or 500 people. And that's just not feasible. My family spends time in northern Michigan. We have since my grandmother, it's her family's property. So she's been there since she was a child. They were there since they were kids. So we spent our summers there. And I always kind of imagined that I would have something there whenever I got married, whether it be the full wedding or not. But we had a ceremony there, very small reception, and then did a bigger like party reception here, recreated some of the elements so that people could, kind of experience both. And that was a larger group and it was a lot of fun. Highly recommend.
How did you and Molly meet?
We met at a friend's birthday party at Thursday Night Live. I'll be honest, I was on dating apps. People are crazy on dating apps. And I was just kind of fed up and annoyed. And it was after COVID. So like things were weird anyways. And then people are weird. And it was just a lot of weird. And so I got off all of the dating apps and kind of jokingly told a friend, don't you have a single friend that has a job and like a hobby? Like my standards are low. The bar is low here, okay, compared to the people I dated prior to that. And she was like, no, I think all of those people you've already dated or you don't like. So I was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna be alone forever. That's fine. And then no joke, a couple weeks later, it was her birthday. We were at Thursday Night Live and there was a group of people and I knew everyone in the group except for Molly. And that was it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always love to ask people how they met because I would say honestly 90% of my couples now meet on a dating app.
Yeah.
Because we don't do normal things anymore like people used to. So that's the new normal.
Yeah. So almost a dating app for me.
Glenn?
I met my husband, and you mentioned terminology, and I think hearing me say my husband still kind of is like, like just because back then, like my partner was kind of the thing you said.
Yeah.
So just hearing me say my husband, and it always is refreshing. So I make sure that I do it in any setting that I go into to make people feel comfortable. I just like to mention that because terminology is so important.
Yeah.
We met in 2013 through the apps.
I love it.
We met through the dating apps. I was actually on my way to DC to move there for work. And I'll just be completely honest. When we met, I was very frank and upfront and very forward. We met at Sutton's in Lexington, the food was so good. And I just remember the conversation was pouring out of us about our families, all the different things that we were going on in our life. But before we could even get into big conversation, I said, listen, I'm moving to DC in 2 days. This is not going to work, but it was nice to meet you. And he was just like, what? And I was just like, well, this was just a date. I didn't expect a relationship out of it. And I moved to DC and I was there for at least 6.5 months. But the cool thing about this is that I said, if it's meant to be, he will call me or he'll check in and we'll see what happens. He called me every day. He never missed a day. He called every day. Some of the conversations were 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, as much as time as that we could give each other. He would travel up and see me on the weekends. I would travel back to Lexington. And then after my internships and things ended at the Human Rights Campaign, I moved back home. And the first question that was asked of me is, why don't you move in? And this was 6 months into our relationship. And so fast forward to now, we got married in 22. We had a very small, intimate ceremony. We decided to do that versus a big ceremony. And we were surrounded by a few close friends who were witnesses and my family and his family. And then we did a honeymoon in Hawaii.
Love.
We literally left not even a few hours later, went to Hawaii and had a ball for a week. So that was kind of our bliss is, less is more. We just really enjoyed that peace of mind of not having to juggle so many different things and being surrounded by people that kind of loved us for us.
It's saying less is more. And then Kaelyn saying, we would have had 400 or 500 people. Where do you see the guest counts at in the Lexington area for most of the same-sex couples?
I would say that they're similar to heterosexual couples. We see a lot of smaller weddings, 30, 50, 100 or less. And I'm speaking purely for myself, but what I've seen is that typically it depends on whether their family is supportive or not. If their family is supportive, they will have a bigger crowd. In that case, I'm seeing still in the 200, 250, 300 range. We had one last year, there was 325 for same-sex couples. Now, if their family's not super supportive, then maybe it's on the lower side, right? They tend to have, closer friends, sub-family members or extended family members. Now, that's not to say that it's not always the case. It could be that they just have small families, but their family's still supportive. So I'm not saying that's a cut and dry rule, but we typically see more or less depending on their family.
Do you think that the age of the couple also determines a little bit of how many guests they have?
Yes, but not because they're same sex. I think we see, even with our heterosexual couples, that if they're younger, they typically have larger friend groups. If they're straight out of college, they've got the sorority or fraternity folks. They've got their high school friends they're still tight with. They've got their college friends they're still tight with. Versus a little later in life, they have their core friends. Maybe they have more work friends that are there, but it's not as many. Now, again, not always the case, but more often than not.
And then, Kaelyn, I know you've said that you have worked with same-sex couples for their wedding planning. Glenn, have you also done same-sex weddings as well?
Yeah, I've done everything from coordination to, full event design, whatever that looks like. And just to kind of piggyback off what Kaelyn said, I think that I wanted to joke earlier because it is the truth. If gay weddings are fun,
they are.
I mean, that is just Kaelyn and I, we're planning one now. That's just fun, right? But gay weddings can be a challenge. I think as gay people, we want the best of the best, and we want to hang the moon and the stars for our significant other, and that can be a challenge. And I think sometimes, you can have all those things, but you also, as a planner, have to tone down expectations based on what you can actually deliver. I think Kaelyn and I really have discovered on these discovery calls with couples, initially, like, where the family dynamic is amongst these couples. Like Kaelyn said, if it's a larger couple, I mean, these gay individuals are popular. Don't get me wrong. They know a lot of people. They're movers and shakers in the community. But also, I think it's really interesting as planners when we're on these calls, we kind of know where we're going to have to step in also to kind of help couples navigate those unique conversations as well. Because Kaelyn and myself, like, we will step in and defend anybody hardcore. Mm-hmm. This is their day. I think it's just very interesting to see how big weddings can get with LGBTQ couples, but also the individuals that choose those small, intimate couples. There's usually a reason behind it, mm-hmm. those family dynamics, or what they feel most comfortable with.
I'll tell you, same-sex weddings, there is an added layer of challenge there for us on the planning side. We have to work extra hard. And I think especially, 75% of our team identifies as LGBTQ. So I think we have a different perspective maybe. And other planners and vendors who identify as LGBTQ could say the same, right? I'm not saying we're the only ones. But we understand it. My first ceremony, the smaller reception was in Michigan, which I mentioned, and I experienced it for the first time. Here in Kentucky, I know what vendors are open to working with a same-sex couple and are not. I know what venues we can go to. I know where we should take people. And so I obviously avoid those vendors that aren't, right? I'm never going to knowingly take a same-sex couple to a vendor that doesn't agree with their life. Now, also, I'm probably not going to work with that vendor anyways, even for the heterosexual couples, but that's a conversation for later. But I know where to go, right? But when I went to Michigan, I had a very small knowledge base of vendors just from things that I've done there. My family's in the hospitality industry, so we've done some events there, but my knowledge is not as great as it is here. And I experienced for the first time calling caterers, and when I tell them it's a same-sex wedding, them telling me I should go somewhere else. Multiple cake makers, 2 venues. I mean, there were a lot of vendors that I encountered that would not even give me a quote because it was a same-sex wedding. And so for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I protect. It really gave me an appreciation for what we do, especially, not that we don't love our heterosexual couples, but especially for our same-sex couples, that we provide that shield of here's where you should go, here's where you should use, and making sure they are protected. Because the last thing you want to do when you've overcome all you've had to overcome being in the LGBTQ community is to then decide that you're going to display it for the world and take that step of getting married. And you've got to deal with Bill, the cake maker, who doesn't want to make a cake for a gay wedding. He's not going to be there for the wedding. He's not ever going to see the couple, but he doesn't want to make it, right? It's like, come on, Bill, get it together. Bill's not a real person, just so everyone knows.
Talking about like gay weddings being fun, not that all weddings aren't fun. I have found that I enjoy planning same-sex weddings and ethnic weddings the most. Not to say they're not all fun. Mm-hmm. They're just, people have worked really hard for that.
Yeah.
And to get there. And the ethnic weddings, they're, 2-3 days long. And when the guests are there, they are genuinely happy to be there for 12 hours a day for 3 days. And a lot of times when we go to the normal Saturday afternoon wedding at the church at 4:00 and go to cocktail hour and go to dinner, it's like people are like, oh, it's my whole Saturday. I can't do anything today because I have to give my whole Saturday up for somebody's wedding. It's a very different vibe. I think it's interesting that other people see that because I don't really talk about that with people, but
yeah,
I think it's interesting that you mentioned how much fun they are and how different it is.
I mean, I can tell you, I've done hundreds of weddings. I can tell you something specific about every single same-sex wedding that I've done. Drag shows, fireworks shows, confetti cannons, just some piece. And even if it isn't super outlandish, some sentimental piece. We did a wedding last October at Buffalo Trace, one of the last that they had, Elliot and Michael, and they had table numbers for each table that were a photo of them in another country that they had traveled to. And it was the cutest, but also the most sentimental. So like their seating chart was a map of the world. And you go find your table. I mean, just, and again, not that heterosexual couples don't have those special details, but I cannot tell you every wedding I've ever done. There are a handful that stand out, but I can tell you every single same-sex couple, at least one detail.
Mm-hmm.
What was their connection to Kentucky? Because they live in New York, don't they?
Yes, but one of the grooms is from the Winchester area.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because I remember seeing like on Kentucky Pro's Instagram, like their dances and
awesome.
like I remember that just from their Instagram and like looking at how fun that was.
Yeah. Full lighting show. Lighting show. I mean, it was amazing.
When couples are just getting engaged, if they decide that they are not either ready to go for a full service planner or it's not in their budget and they are researching vendors, what are some of the things that they should look for in language and just in photos, websites, maybe the things that you didn't find in Michigan that you wish people would have had on their websites, those kind of things?
I was just gonna, some of the things that I think about, I mean, Sarah, you just mentioned it, language. I think red flag, not necessarily, but for some could be gender neutral language, so looking at things that don't say bride and groom only, looking through vendors' sites and socials to see if they do showcase diverse couples, I think is something I would look for. I think also it's not flinching when you tell them that you're queer or trans, right? Like if I, like Kaelyn just mentioned earlier, so if I say that me and my husband, or if I say like my identity is I'm a trans individual, I mean, if you see kind of not a good, behavior from them by just mentioning that, it's probably best not to go with them. You're not going to have a good experience with them. I know I mentioned the inclusive contract piece. I think is important.
Yeah.
Interview questions during consultations. Kaelyn and I do this regularly during discovery calls. But in that discovery call, if you don't have a good feeling with the person that you're talking with, it's probably best to back away because you're not going to have a good experience through that process. And the last thing that I'll mention is don't be afraid to ask vendors directly if they've worked with LGBT couples, because 9 times out of 10, they're either going to tell you I have, or if they say they haven't, you probably don't want to work with them.
Yeah. And the caveat would be, the only caveat I would make to what Glenn said, I agree with everything you said. I find that especially when I was new to planning, you get what you get, right? And by that I mean, like, the more weddings I book at ABC venue and the more photos I have of working at ABC venue, the more weddings I'm going to get at ABC venue, right? Because if you're wanting to go to that venue, and you go to their social media and you see photos from our page, then you're automatically going to come to us, right? So we see our bookings in cycles, right? If we have a bunch of weddings at Clear Story, all of a sudden we get a bunch more weddings at Clear Story, right? And then we're at Signature Club quite a bit, and then we're at Harper Hall. It all kind of changes. And I say that to say that if a vendor has never done a same-sex wedding, you should absolutely be cautious. The asterisk or the caveat is, ask if they're okay with it. And there have been some vendors we've worked with that have said, I've never done one, but I would love to. If someone says I would love to, I'm willing to give you a shot, right? And then let's talk about other things. But it could just be that somebody's got to be first, right? And then as soon as they post that we did this gay wedding or this lesbian wedding, they're going to get more bookings. Glenn's right. Absolutely ask the questions. And I mean, if you say, like, have you done a gay wedding before? And they're like, no, it's like, okay, Bill, here we are, Bill. And the language is a big one. I've owned many a venue in Central Kentucky, and never have I ever called it a bridal suite or a groom's lounge or a whatever. In fact, I have fought co-owners on calling it those things. An easy way, if you're a vendor, an easy way to book a same-sex wedding is to get rid of all that gender-specific language. Bride's name, bride's mom, groom's mom. I'll tell you the most disheartening thing of my wedding was we had picked a ceremony spot, gorgeous ceremony spot, in the woods in Michigan, in northern Michigan, and in August. It's cool. We've got tree coverage, but still bright. And we had been booked for a year. I had talked to this girl multiple times. I had also looked at taking some other events there after I'd gone and done a tour. And she knew repeatedly that it was a same-sex wedding. And we get to, the 30-day time frame when everyone starts asking all the questions. And she sends me this questionnaire that is bride's name, bride's mom's name, bride's dad's name, and then it was groom's name, groom's dad, groom's mom, groom's grandmother, And so I sent the information in an email body instead of completing the form. And she was like, I'm really sorry, I hate to ask, but can you complete the form because it auto-populates to the rest of our team? And I said, respectfully, I will complete the form when the form is accurate to this wedding. I was like, we don't have 75% of the things that you've asked for in this form. I'm not going to complete it. So you can either copy and paste it and do it yourself, or send me a form that doesn't say groom's name, and then I'll fill it out. And I will say she felt very bad. She called me, not even an email. She called and was like, I just want to apologize. I didn't even think about it. We send those automatically. She was like, I haven't read it in years, like actually read a blank one. I just read the details that come through. She was like, I cannot apologize enough. This was a great learning opportunity for us. And I would still recommend them to other people, right? Because, she knew. It's not like it was a surprise. It's not like we did a bait and switch and she found out 30 days before. But, I do think sometimes folks just don't know, right?
And I know, like, with the wedding shows, whenever you go to sign up for those here in Lexington specifically, I know 2 of those have changed their wording so that it's better. What are some of the specific trends that you see in same-sex weddings? You mentioned drag shows. We see those quite a bit, and I love them. What are other things that you're seeing?
We've seen a lot with fireworks, light shows, things like that. A lot of dramatic colors, which I love. I think by nature of same-sex couples, which we've mentioned, several times already, they've done so much to get this far. I think they don't hold back, right? Like, we're going to be bold. We're going to be bold with the colors. We're going to be bold with the decor. And I love it. And I'm here for it. It's color schemes you wouldn't normally see. It's interesting venues you wouldn't normally see. They're willing to push the envelope a little bit more on some of those choices. And I absolutely love it.
It's more creative and less adherence, I think, to rules. The rule book is out the window.
Mhm.
It is creative as possible. It's your mixed gender wedding parties. You're not seeing all male, all female on one side. It's very mixed gender. Like Kaelyn mentioned, non-traditional outfits. You're not seeing the typical outfits. They might have matching suits or jumpsuits, or both are wearing dresses. You know, it runs the gamut, which keeps it creative. And honestly, the photos turn out absolutely gorgeous. The ceremony piece, I think, is cool because I think, Kaelyn, and you know this from the events we've done, the ceremonies have gotten so creative, and how people, it's not the traditional, we have to do this, X this, follow the officiant to here, do all these like different details. The unity ceremonies are either there or not, but they're different if they are there. Oh, and the entrances. Entrances are always unique.
Oh
I
my
love those
gosh.
too.
Yes. You know, the one thing I regret, we did a wedding in 2019 for Mark Mazingo and Chris Rubel, and I'm just going to say their names, their whole full name, just going to say it. And it was the most fabulous, and they're actually still really good friends of mine. If you follow me on social media, you'll see that I post often about Mark's garden company because they're fabulous. But their wedding was fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. They did a drag show, like variety show for the rehearsal dinner. They had a drag show at the reception. There was a whole ass garden inside of Limestone Hall. It was amazing. Fireworks, confetti cannons, an entrance you would not believe, mixed gendered wedding party with different types of clothes. And in their ceremony, instead of having a ring bearer, 2 family members had the rings and they passed them up the line with, so each, I don't want to say bridesmaids, groomsmen, because that's not correct. Here we are with language. Wedding party member?
Wedding part of it. Mm-hmm.
See, even we don't know how to say it. So it's okay. Each wedding party member kind of passed it. They said a little something. They blessed it. They gave it some well wishes and then passed it to the next person. And it was beautiful. And there was not a single dry eye in that room. I mean, you could see the love from everyone in that room. And I think we maxed out the capacity at Limestone Hall that night. It was huge, but it was the sweetest thing ever. So shout out Mark and Chris.
It's 6 years later and you still remember that.
I could tell you every single detail of that wedding. Every single detail. What I was going to say is the only regret I have of that wedding, I got on a whole tangent about how much I loved it and I forgot what I was saying. The thing I regret was not taking a video of that wedding because it was fabulous. You know, we didn't have content creators and all that back then. We had social media, but that was in a land before time, you know, but it was wonderful. Oh, I wish I could go back and get a video. It was fabulous.
Doug and Glenn had a wedding at Manchester Music Hall. I think it was last fall. I don't know the couple, but one of the grooms, he had a custom made white dress. The lion head or the tiger head on the side of it was incredible. Have you all had to help couples navigate any family dynamics leading up to the wedding or on the day of the wedding?
Yes.
All the time.
We're going to need a 3-hour episode to talk about that. You know, I think with any kind of couple, right? Same sex, heterosexual, doesn't matter. There's family drama, right? And that's something as planners we navigate. I mean, you know, people always say I don't need a planner, and there's so much more than we do than just picking out your linens and setting up your tables and, you know, making you a timeline. It's so much more than that. And a big part of that is kind of acting as an unpaid therapist, right? And that's across the board. I mean, the amount of family drama I have talked through, navigated through, worked around, planned around is wild. But I think with same-sex couples, occasionally there's an extra layer where family members don't approve and they're not coming, or family members quote unquote approve but they really don't approve, right? They approve, but they won't call you by your chosen name, or they won't use your correct pronouns, or they won't whatever, right? So it's approval-ish, but not really. And they're making things uncomfortable. Or family members that refuse to come or refuse to engage. We had that with our wedding. Family members that just would, you know, they love us and they support us. That's what they say. But then they say, we can't come and support your marriage and your wedding. Okay, cool. It's a different level of hurt with same-sex couples that they have to experience, because it's not just that your parents got divorced and they can't talk to each other, right? I can deal with that. I can put Bill in the second row. Bill is always a problem, right? I can put Julie and Bill in separate seats, separate rows. I mean, we've even done so much as separating them by 2 or 3 rows, right? I can do that. That's not a problem. Your parents got divorced and they hate each other, no problem, right? You got an uncle that gets a little too drunk, I can deal with that. You got a cousin that wasn't invited, it's going to show up anyways, absolutely. I got 2 security guards we can hire tomorrow. Shout out Eddie. But you are devastated because a family member refuses to come because they can't support you loving somebody else. That's hard. Mm-hmm. I can be there and support you in all the ways, right? But I can't fix that. And it's hard. And I mean, I think a lot of us in this, we're not in industry, but in the LGBTQ community, LGBTQ industry, if you will, I think a lot of us have gone through that in some way or another, or we have somebody close to us that has. So it's hard.
Kaelyn, are there any of the people that you invited that chose not to come? Do you still speak to them? Or are they just kind of distant memories now?
We do still speak to them. They are family members. It's not the same as it was prior to. And it's different for one of us than it is the other, because it's the person's family that it is. You know, it's hard because they are family, right? And they're so good to us. And we have a 4-year-old and they're so good to him. And for all intents and purposes, they do love us and care about us, right? So for me, it's kind of like, then how is that one thing you're like, we're just going to pretend we don't see that, but everything else we're good? So it's hard, right? Because it's hard to go to family functions and pretend like you didn't straight up disrespect us for our wedding when we do all these things for you and you do all these things for us. It just seems odd. It's really hard to wrap your mind around. So yes, we do still talk to them. We don't see them as much. We don't participate in all of the things. We choose specific things that we participate in. And the dynamic in the relationship has definitely changed, which is sad. But the alternative was just cutting them out altogether. And I don't know that that really solves a problem either.
Glenn, did you run into that situation any, or have you ran into that situation any?
Well, you know, I'm in an interracial marriage. So there's an added component of my husband being Black. I will say this up front and honest. I have some of the best parents. They are just so lovey-dovey on everybody, would give their shirt off their backs. I have very supportive parents. Shout out to mom and dad. I mean, they are my best friends. I couldn't have asked for a better coming out story for myself, which is not usually the case for people in our community. Not to speak on behalf of my husband, I'm sure he'd be fine for me to share, but being Black and gay is a completely different story. Not only does he have to encounter potential homophobia from other family members, but then also me being from an Eastern Kentucky area as well, then people are hit with, oh, you're gay, and oh, wait, now you're dating someone of color. So it's homophobia, then racism. So he's dealing with all the isms, and he's not just dealing with this in our marriage. I mean, like, he's in a predominantly female working field, which is nursing too. So he hits it from all angles constantly. My parents and his parents have been supportive, but we've had the aunts and the uncles and the people that have made family gatherings very awkward. So much so to where we made decisions for ourselves. And like I said, we're a different situation. Kaelyn has a child, right? And so that kind of influences your decision in making sure that they see some of their family members. We don't have children. So not that we might have children at some point. And we've cared for other people's children. But, currently we made the decision for ourselves that we're not attending spaces where we don't feel valued and appreciated. And so when it comes to holiday traditions and that sort of thing, to be completely honest, we meet with my parents, his parents, and that's it. Because we've kind of drawn the line in the sand where, if you don't support us fully, then we can't be in your lives. And although that is a harsh statement to make and a realization that took several years for us to kind of conquer, and it was hard to have those conversations even with my parents because they were teary-eyed, right? Because they're like, but this is my family and, I want you to be there and we want to see you open gifts and do all the things. They were like, we can, you know what? We can create new traditions. It's not going to look the same, but we can create new traditions and we can redirect things in a way that makes everybody feel comfortable, but we're still in your lives. Because then it turns around to your parents want you to feel safe. It's like Mama Bear, Papa Bear is coming out, and now we've got a bigger situation. So
yeah. Well, and that's a good point, Glenn. I think if it weren't for our son, it probably would have gone a different way. It probably would have been a pretty quick removal from those family members. But he has a great relationship with them. And so it's very hard. It's hard for Foyle to understand that we don't spend time with these people anymore because they don't believe that we're a real family or don't respect that we are a real family.
And you bring up a good point, Kaelyn. It's if I was in your situation and had a child, I would have handled it the same way that you all handled it, because it's establishing that like your relationship with those people is not the child's relationship.
Right.
In my mind, if we had kids, and I'm sure Terrell would agree, you know, I would want my child to have a relationship with an aunt that we might disagree with, but we have that disagreement.
Right.
They don't.
Sure.
They don't.
Yeah. As long as it's not being discussed with the child, that, you know, and we've had conversations like at the point, if it ever got to the point where they were saying our family is wrong or this is not okay, that's when there's an immediate halt. No second chances. We're done. Do not pass go. Do not collect any dollars. But for now, we're good. TBD.
I do have some moms that listen to the podcast. If this is something they will be experiencing on the wedding day, is maybe other family members and not knowing what type of situation or how someone will behave on that day or rehearsal, what type of advice would you have for them?
The easiest thing is just to remove people, right? Like, and you know, I have this conversation with clients a lot, especially same-sex clients, that when you're working on the invitation list, and I think not just with inviting people, I also feel this way about creating menus and picking venues and creating the wedding, right? Because you are inviting people and you want them to come and celebrate you. But I think what people forget a lot is that this celebration is about you. It's about your union and your marriage and your wedding. And I feel like people so often are trying to create things for other people, right? And I'm not saying you should not consider your guest. Don't hear that. Absolutely, we should consider the guest experience 100% of the time. But we shouldn't not pick the beef whatever. If you love beef whatever, we should have that, right? If you love a pizza bar or a taco bar, I don't care that Aunt Susie says you need to have a formal plated meal. We're having a damn taco bar, all right? And I feel that way about inviting guests. You know, and there's a level of shuffling there, right? Like if your parents are paying for the wedding and they want to invite their long lost third cousin, we might have to talk about it, right? But otherwise, people who you don't feel like are going to support you, they don't get an invite, or they get a save the date and they don't get an invitation. So we had those family members I mentioned earlier. They got an invitation to the Michigan event. Not only did they RSVP no, but they came and said, we do not support, we will not support. So they didn't get an invitation to the Lexington one, right? We're not going to go through that twice. I think if you don't have two events, an easier or another solution would be sending a save the date. And if there's, you know, negative whatever in response, and they just don't get an invitation, or they don't get one in the first place. That's the easiest way, right? Like if they're not invited, then you don't have to stress about it. And then if they do get invited and they say yes and you're just not sure, I think that's where a planner could be really helpful if these people are flagged. Similarly, we do this with problem family members. If somebody has a drinking problem, or there are family members that don't like each other and we're aware of that on the front end. You know, we all have that one cousin or that one uncle or whoever that causes some trouble. With all of our clients, we ask during the timeline process, is there anyone we should be looking out for that might cause problems? That could be a similar conversation, right? Are there any family members that we think might cause issues during the ceremony or during the event in general? And then we have a plan in place, right, to quickly and swiftly remove them and invite them to meet us outside. Out back, if you will.
I think Kaelyn hit the nail on the head with the first statement that she made. It's with same-sex couples, and this is just in general across the board with any couple, it's just reminding yourself that this wedding is yours and it's not your family's, right? It is not your family's, it is yours. And it's okay not to invite someone who doesn't support you, full stop. You do not have to you don't have to invite someone that's going to disturb your peace on your day, because if you give someone the opportunity, it will occur, right? That's for any wedding. That is for any wedding. And so, the last thing I'd like just to piggyback off that Kaelyn said, I think that we hear when we have these discovery calls, a lot of people are trying to say, do I need a planner? Do I not need a planner? XYZ vendors are more important. I think these conversations that we're having really stress why a planner is, if not one of the most essential parts of your wedding, because they're helping handle so many conversations and behind the scenes things that you don't have to worry about, like having those tactfully redirected conversations with family members to keep them at a distance, creating a safety plan if, Uncle Bill decides to come in and cause a scene, hiring security if it's needed. If you're that worried, we'll get the security to make sure that whoever's on that list enters and no one else
And that
will be
sounds
entering.
dramatic, but we've done that. We've hired security for events before, and not just same-sex weddings. We have hired security for events before where there are family members that were not invited for specific reasons that decide they're going to show up anyways, right? Because people have no boundaries, and we've hired security and have had them removed or just won't let them in. So don't be afraid.
I'm going to say that's not completely uncommon, and there are several venues that already have like security on site. Harper Hall has security, the Thoroughbred Center, I think Manchester Music Hall. It's just part of their standard procedure to have security.
Planners, we really do. We protect the peace. I mean, at all costs, we will do whatever we need to do to kind of make sure that, and that goes into our logistics and everything we do. We're there to help protect your peace at all costs, always.
The planner, a lot of times, will be the one that has to run interference, and you literally have to have an extra person there just to babysit sometimes. Yeah. It's not just same-sex couples that might have any instance like that on the wedding day.
Well, and another thing that you have to navigate or might have to navigate, similar to divorced parents, if you have parents in a same-sex scenario who maybe aren't as supportive, or they're still coming around, or they don't understand. We have a lot of clients who want to include those people, but they're not sure how, right? Like, I don't have that relationship with my dad to have a first dance, right? And I'm not going to force it, but how can I include my dad so it still feels special, but it's meaningful to us and not a forced father-daughter dance just because we feel we need to check that box, right? Or maybe you're a gender-neutral person, and so a father-daughter dance doesn't make sense, right? Or maybe you're a masculine-facing female. A father-daughter dance probably doesn't make sense. So how can we incorporate some special, unique moments without making you and or your parent feel uncomfortable? Similar to navigating divorced parents, there's a lot of that with family members that has to be talked about.
Kaelyn, when you were reaching out to vendors in Michigan, do you find now that maybe the Lexington area is more inclusive than what you found there, or do you think it's about the same?
It's a loaded question, only because the place in Michigan, we were in northern Michigan, right? These are very small towns. They don't have a huge event community anyways. I think if you were to compare by percentage, it would probably be somewhat even. We ended up bringing a lot, if anyone's familiar with northern Michigan, we ended up bringing, well, there's video on this, right? So we're up here in northern Michigan. This is Lake Michigan. So if you're looking at the Mitt, we're up here, and Traverse City is kind of like right here. We ended up bringing a lot of vendors from Traverse, which is about an hour from where we are. It would be similar to bringing vendors from Louisville or from Lexington to Louisville or to northern Kentucky. And similar to Kentucky, they all work and travel and do that pretty nicely. Just for sake of selection, going to Traverse was a little easier, but we did find that there was a bigger pool of people to choose from, which meant that it was a bigger pool of same-sex friendly vendors. So in that regard, obviously being in Kentucky, the Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee is really where we do most of our work. So we just have a bigger pool of people to choose from that we've worked with often. But I think if you looked at percentages, it probably would have been the same. But I will say Central Kentucky, Northern Kentucky, etc. Well, let's just say all Kentucky except for maybe Eastern and like deep Western Kentucky is pretty friendly to same-sex weddings. There's still a handful. I'll be honest. There are still a handful that don't love it. And we give them $0. Not our dollars, not our clients' dollars. And we'll tell a client, we're not going there. We're not using them. I won't do it. I don't care if you love them or if they're the cheapest one. We won't do it.
And I think that is very important for a heterosexual couple as well. That's a question you want to ask. If you care about the world in general and you care about your family and friends, those are things that you want to know and you want to ask, and keep that in mind when you're making your decisions.
Absolutely. And we have a lot of heterosexual couples that ask, like, we'd like to find a caterer that's Black owned. We'd like to find a florist that is open to people of all kinds, right? We want to find a cake maker that's sustainably run. I mean, we love it. Not that, we turn other people away, but also we're an LGBTQ company. So if they're not into that, they're probably not calling us anyways. So we're already one step ahead once we get there. Hopefully they've looked at our profile and they already know. But, it's people care. Couples of all types care. So talking about social media and websites, to Glenn's point earlier, I think putting it out there, we are open to all people, or this is our sustainability stance, or this is how we feel about blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'm not saying you need to get into politics, right? But if you're open to that, and or you're really passionate about it. I mean, if you go to our websites, we have very clear statements about sustainability, about who we work with and who we don't work with. We want to make it very clear. And not just because I want the clients that we want to see it, but I want the clients that we don't want to see it. And if that doesn't align with you, do not waste our time filling out a contact form. I don't want to spend an hour of my time on a discovery call or an hour of Glenn's time going to a site visit to learn when we get there that you don't like one of these 7 things that we believe. We're not a good fit. We don't want your money. But I will say to the vendors who say, I don't want to do a same-sex wedding, why not? Because the money actually is green. All money is green. And once it goes into your account, the bank doesn't know if it's gay money or straight money, right? It all goes in there. And it just rolls around. And then you get to spend it just the same. That's how I feel.
On that note, I'm going to wrap up part 1 of our Pride Month series celebrating LGBTQ plus weddings. We hope you felt seen, inspired, and empowered because your love deserves to be celebrated fully and freely. Be sure to tune in for part 2, where we'll be sharing a list of inclusive vendors and affirming churches, along with helpful resources to support you on your wedding planning journey. Until then, remember, love is love, and your story is worth celebrating. For more information about Simply Love Studio or to schedule your wedding consultation, go to simplylovestudio.com.